The Makhanda High Court yesterday set aside a decision by the Mineral Resources and Energy Department to grant Shell exploration rights to conduct a seismic survey off the Wild Coast in the Eastern Cape. Communities and non-profit organizations asked the court to block Shell's planned seismic survey, raising concerns of irreparable harm to the environment as well as the livelihoods of communities. Lobbyist groups say oil and gas exploration will contribute to climate change. Now, the judgment indicated that while Shell suggests the seismic survey would create jobs to improve socio-economic conditions as well as increase government revenues, but there's no detail given to substantiate the claims. So, strategic lead at the Green Connection Liziwe McDaid and Legal Resources Centre attorney Wilmien Wicomb joins us to talk about this. Ladies, thank you. Thanks so much for joining us here on the programme.
Good morning.
Good morning to you and all the viewers.
Yeah. Liziwe, let me begin with you because, I know that this for you is a very, very big victory. I can imagine when that announcement was made yesterday, this was something that you've been working hard to. Give us your sort of immediate reaction to the ruling.
So as the Green Connection, we've been, supporting all the applicants in a sense of running campaigns because we definitely believe there is absolutely no need for further oil and gas exploration offshore. We work with fishers along the coast, and those fishers depend on the ocean for the livelihood. So yesterday was a really exciting day because Shell is a major oil company, and for fishers to have gone up against it with the help of the lawyers like Wilmien was just such a brilliant victory for them to really feel that we are making strides in trying to ensure sustainable development for the country. We don't need oil and gas. We have a climate crisis, and it won't bring jobs. The economic evidence shows that countries can be worse off after oil and gas exploration. And certainly it's not going to be fishers who depend on the ocean for their food who are going to be getting jobs, highly skilled jobs on oil rigs. So who's going to get those jobs? It's not going to be ordinary people.
I'm going to come back to you on that one, and I just want to bring Wilmien into the conversation. So the understanding is that LRC was not necessarily representing the Green Connection. Who were you representing at the end of the day?
So we were representing the small-scale fishing communities along the Wild Coast. So Kolobeni, Dwesa-Kwebe, and then also some individual fishers from Port St. John's and so on. So we were representing the most directly affected people who were completely ignored in the decision to allow these seismic surveys.
Yeah. So, and how did the LRC come on board in bringing the application on behalf of the Wild Coast communities and small-scale fishers? Did they approach you?
Well, yes. In fact, we've been working with many of those communities for more than a decade in their struggle to assert their land and fishing rights. That has been a struggle for them. And so, we were very familiar with each other when this latest obstacle was placed in their way. And they're veterans of a struggle to save their land and their oceans. So they knew what to do when they heard about Shell's plans in November last year.
Yeah. I want to get back now to the crux of the issue. And obviously, Liziwe, you kind of explained a little bit to us, but I suppose maybe we need to dig a bit deeper into this and say why? Why is a seismic survey such a problem? What would the effects be? Would it be very detrimental? Do we know this? So if in fact it did go ahead, what would the repercussions be from your understanding?
So what I think what I think was really important in the judgment is that the judge acknowledged that should issues like climate change and full information have been given to the decision maker, the decision might have been not to go ahead. So you look at a seismic survey in isolation from what the company wants to do. The seismic survey is just getting the data to decide to go and drill oil and gas. And oil and gas, fossil fuels, we don't need any more of as we move, transitioning away from a fossil past into a renewable future. So the seismic survey itself would have had various impacts. There was scientific evidence put before the court of the sounds, which are very loud, and it's because the boat drags an array of I could say guns, but sound-making devices behind it. This would have an impact on the marine life. The problem is that if you create a sound and you drive the fish away, the fish could go deep into the ocean, and then the fishers are unable to get them. What also happens is you might find their migration patterns are now changed. And remembering this is local coastal communities who have been able, through their access to the ocean, to sustain themselves from a food security and a livelihoods perspective. So we are sitting with most of the youth unemployed, large majority of youth unemployed. So why would you take on an activity which we don't need, and you would thereby risk the undermining of livelihoods of coastal fishers?
Many people would debate you on that, though, and say that we perhaps do need something like this. I mean, you yourself saying that we have many unemployed individuals in this country, and more opportunities are certainly needed. I mean, we are a mineral-rich country, and if in fact there is something that can be found, whether it be gas, oil, whatever the case may be, once this exploration is complete, do you not think that for the area this could create a huge amount of jobs? And is there no way, okay, that's I suppose my one question to you. My second one, is there no way that this could actually work in an environmentally friendly way? Surely it works like that in other countries as well.
Well, I think this is the problem. We all thought that coal was a great idea when we first discovered it. It's powered the globe for a couple of hundred years. And oil and gas is also a fossil fuel. What a wonderful energy source. But what we have discovered as humanity is that that cannot continue, because we are basically boiling ourselves alive. And the droughts and floods that we've seen are clear signals that, the world is changing. So now the question is, why would we then continue with this kind of exploration and this kind of resource exploitation, rather than shift to something which is actually going to maintain and improve our quality of life? And we all know that if you look at the numbers, then the amount of jobs that are going to come from the drilling and the oil rigs not going to happen. We've already had companies which have come here and have actually told people there's not going to be any jobs. An oil rig operating out sea is a high-tech piece of equipment, and they themselves admit it might take 10 years before the drilling of the oil, if they find anything, would take place. Whereas if you just really push and make South Africa a renewable energy hub, then you've got between 2 or 3 years, and you've got power plants up and running. You can then start creating factories, and that's when you could start employing our unemployed. So you've got to choose which way you're going to put your infrastructure.
Yeah, I suppose so. But, in times where we're finding that, Europe is going into a very difficult time now as we head into the winter months, and we know with the issues happening in Russia and the Ukraine, with the shortage of gas, and they will be looking for alternative ways, coal being one of them. And, this is one way where the country will start seeing some more income coming in. And this is at a point where the country is on its knees at the moment, and the people are on its knees. I totally understand where you're coming from in terms of wanting to keep this green economy. But I suppose the real challenge for me is finding that balance. If we are sitting with something off the coast and the wild coast that could create a lot of wealth in that area, should we not explore, at least explore, and then decide from there?
No. I'm very firm on that one because what we're really doing is we have to make a choice. And once you start exploring, you are going to end up with oil and gas sold internationally. Just remember, it's not going to get us cheap petrol. And the income that we get from that will not, in our view, offset the potential risk and damage for the future. So we have to, as this generation, we have to look to the future generations and say, what will they say when they grow up? As what decisions did we take, and for what reason? And the economics don't work for in other countries. What happens is the profits will go to somebody, and the communities will be left with the burden of the downside. And we don't need that. That's, I think, the question. We don't need that. We have lots of minerals that we can explore, and we know that South Africa is full of those rare earth minerals that we need for technology, so that we can look at that and how do we exploit them in a way that obviously is safe for people, because some of them are quite toxic. But we also, the European situation, they have a war, they have a problem with their gas, and they also have a weather system which is very unlike us. We have one of the best resources of solar. That's a resource. Let's exploit it to the full, and can compete worldwide with that resource.
It certainly, I mean, it certainly is, and I do agree with you on that. But I suppose it's also the issue of finding the balance, and that's quite a big one. Just Liz, in terms of, sorry, Liz, I'm going to quiz you on this and try and ask you these questions, because we don't have, unfortunately, we don't have somebody from the opposite side talking to why they are for this. But my question to you is, do you have, I mean, is there empirical evidence that going in there and actually doing a seismic survey has had these devastating effects that you talk of? I mean, we know that Shell are going to be doing this in Namibia, and this is an exercise that is going to be taking place, and with a lot of money involved in that as well.
So actually, interestingly enough, 2 days ago, I heard from a fishing company, and it seems that in Namibia, this is part of the problem which is coming to the fore. So, the predictions of harm are now becoming real. And what they are finding is that the fish, the seismic survey comes and goes, and the fish don't just come back. And so this is having an impact on now their economy from a fishing perspective. That's how I understand it. So, the situation is we have to ask, why do we need the oil and gas? If we want to make money, well, there are other resources on land that we can use. If we say we need it for energy, well, we know that what's going to happen, whatever's discovered will be sold on the international market, and it will be the highest price. It won't necessarily impact positively on South Africa. And if we are saying that we don't need that as an energy because we want to look at new energy sources and modern energy sources and look more renewables, where's our advantage? And South Africa has that advantage because we have huge resources. So why don't we focus on exploiting those resources, driving jobs, driving the economy, and in that way we can become ahead of the game? That would be our view.
Yeah. Wilmien, let me bring you in here, because I know that the LRC got onto the case last year and consulted to get expert advice for better understanding of marine science. So I suppose you also have become quite the expert on this and the findings on the problem posed by the seismic survey. Perhaps you can add your voice to this as well.
Yes, thank you. So, yes, indeed. So we had a number of experts who, from different angles, were able to show the court what would likely happen with seismic survey. So what one must remember is, as one of our experts explained it, a seismic survey, it's these air guns blasted into the ocean bed, and it's like, for a human, it would be like being in a continuous thunderstorm for 4 months or 6 months, right? So that's the impact of it on marine life. Now, marine life is vastly more dependent on sound. Sound is everything under the ocean, as we know. It's how marine life, all their patterns are communicated. Mating, migratory patterns, all of that has to do with sound. So if you have such an enormous disruption of that kind of sound, multiple experts say it is highly unlikely that you're not going to cause real harm. The problem, one of the problems that everyone acknowledges, including Shell, is that it's very expensive to research the harm itself for various reasons. So states are not able to afford that kind of research. The only ones who would be able is a corporation like Shell. But of course, it would not be in their interest to do that research. So it's not done. And so they're able to say, well, there is no evidence of direct extreme harm, and therefore we must accept that there will not be harm. Now, the court said, well, no, actually the opposite applies when you're dealing with the environment. You have to apply the precautionary principle. If there's uncertainty, which the court said on the face of what they've seen on the papers, there's massive dispute as to what the harm will be. And in those circumstances, the minister must apply a precautionary approach, must get independent views on what the harm will be. The problem we have with these decisions is that the minister accepts an application from a company, and what we typically see is he does not apply his mind to any independent evidence. He only looks at what the company tells him. And I mean, it stands to reason that that will not be a balanced piece of information about what harm and advantages will be. And that's really the key of what the court said. That's a bad decision. And we can't, decisions as important as this one, we can't be making without applying our minds to it.
Yeah, well, a very interesting judgment, it really is. And I know that we've spoken about the communities who felt that they were not sufficiently consulted on this. And this was also at the heart of all of this. And it's also the spiritual aspect, I know, was one of those that were brought up as well as the whole fishing community. One question somebody has come through, and I think it's quite an important one, is that, would this not offer bigger benefits to the country? And, we may be protecting small fishing communities, but what about the benefits for the rest of the country? I mean, could this not perhaps be something, I think I've asked this question already, but perhaps maybe to the viewer that's asking the same question, we could explain that better.
Yes, so the court said something about that, which I think was very important, because both the minister and Shell in the case made these statements about, the extraordinary benefits that this will bring to the country and the province. It's obviously a very poor province. And yet the court said you had every opportunity to explain what are these benefits going to be, and they just couldn't do it.
Explain.
They didn't do it.
Yeah.
And, it's not enough to assume that oil will bring the country enormous benefit. That's not what we've seen in other African countries. I mean, think of Nigeria. So, it's not an assumption we can make when we make decisions. There must be actual proof. And communities like our clients, they are very aware what's happened to other mining hosting communities in South Africa, in platinum areas and so on. They're far worse off than before mining came. So all the promises were just not fulfilled. So they're very skeptical, and there's just no answer from the minister and Shell as to where these benefits are going to come from.
All right, just a final closing point from you, Liz. We're at 8, so please, if you can, make it quite quick. I mean, if things could have gone as planned between DMRE and Shell, there could have been a second renewal, which has also been set aside, we heard yesterday. But Shell says they are still thinking of their next step. They're still reviewing it, and they're not going to necessarily accept this. What is your next step if Shell chooses to appeal this judgment?
I think we've got to go bigger than that. I think we need an energy vision for the country, a plan that the whole country can look at, understand, participate in, and then get behind. Whether oil and gas is part of that plan, well, if we get an independent plan, then we'll have an answer.
All right, we leave it there. Thank you. Strategic lead at Green Connection, Liziwe McDaid, and human rights lawyer at the Legal Resources Centre, Wilmien Wicomb, talking to us after the Makhanda High Court judgment yesterday set aside a decision by the Mineral Resources and Energy Department to grant Shell exploration rights to conduct a seismic survey of the Wild Coast in the Eastern Cape. So the court basically found there was not much effort to consult with communities, and the government fell short.